Hey, Clayton, in Deuteronomy 13, it says that if someone tries to lead others to worship other gods, even if they're a close family member, you're supposed to report them, and then you throw the first stone to execute them. This raises two questions. First, how does this square with the idea of freedom of religion and respecting the faiths of other people? Second, why would they make someone be the first to throw a stone at their own relative? Let me read the passage that this person is referring to. Deuteronomy 13, starting in verse 1, it says, "If a prophet or someone who foretells by dreams appears among you and announces to you a sign or a wonder, and if that sign or wonder spoken of takes place, and the prophet says, 'Well, now let's follow other gods, gods you have not known, let us worship them,' then you must not listen to the words of that prophet or dreamer. That prophet or dreamer must be put to death for inciting rebellion against the Lord your God. You must purge the evil from among you." This feels very different from our world. In our world, I know people of lots of different faith backgrounds. I know people who are Catholic and Jewish. I know Muslims. I know Mormons. I know Baptists and Wiccans, people with no religious commitment at all, people who have all sorts of different beliefs and practices when it comes to God. And it would get really messy really fast if any of those groups decided we're going to start executing people who disagree with us. This is why we've said we've got freedom of religion in our country, because we don't want that sort of violence. We don't want one group to impose or penalize people because they believe something different. We don't like that. We believe in religious freedom. But this verse seems to indicate God doesn't believe in religious freedom. It seems like he's saying, in the country of Israel here, you got to kill somebody who says, let's worship someone other than me. So how does that work? First of all, a few different things that'll help. First of all, the idea of religion as a category that is a kind of activity separated from other areas of life was not an idea they had in the ancient world. That was non-existent in the ancient world, where you say, you know what, we can kind of live together and I can have business with you and work with you and have this family and do all this stuff. And I've got my own private beliefs and private practices that don't affect that. We can share all of this together, and I'm not going to bring that to shape all of this. That was not a thing they thought. Belief in God, worship of God, the idea of different religious things, that was all woven into every area of life. And the idea that religion is a thing you can abstract away from all of that, that is a pretty modern idea. That's something that's only really been around in the world for a few centuries here. And so in most times and places, these things are combined. So when you're talking about what kind of society are you going to be, it was very normal for someone to say, well, part of what it means to be our society is we're devoted to these gods. The Romans did that, the Egyptians did that, and so on. So Israel's saying, hey, if you're going to be a part of Israel, this is the God that we serve in this place, and it's going to influence our government and the way we structure society and so on. And we're going to stick with that. That was normal back then. How could you be committed to a deity and not have that affect everything you do? So they just brought those things together. Second thing to keep in mind is that this law is in the context of a covenant between God and Israel. A covenant, if you've been listening to some of the things we've been talking about in the book of Deuteronomy, you've heard us say that a covenant is like a treaty between a great king and a people who are coming under that king's protection and rule. So the powerful king, this emperor, says, I am going to take you under my wing. You're going to pledge loyalty to me, and I'm going to pledge loyalty to you, and we're going to make a treaty. We're going to make an agreement. And we're going to commit to each other. So idolatry is not simply a matter of kind of a different philosophical opinion. You know, what gods do I think are out there? This is not someone reflecting on the nature of the universe. This is treason against your king. You have made a treaty with this God to be your king. This would be the equivalent of a U.S. citizen during World War II saying, I'm going to join a Nazi group. Well, we'd look at that and say, that's treason. That's sedition. There could be something in that behavior that would be criminal. We might even, in some forms, if certain things you do, we might execute you because we say, this is actually undermining our society and you're siding with the enemy. So the people of Israel, they've pledged loyalty to King God, and now they're saying, I'm actually going to go over here and give my loyalty to this other leader. Third thing to keep in mind is that we are not under the same covenant as Israel. So the way they carry this out is not the same way we do. In the new covenant under Jesus, it includes people of many different nations, which means we are not a political entity. The church is not a government. The church is not a political state, not in the way that other states are. We exist in all different nations, under all different legal systems, in all sorts of different cultures. In this era, God has said to his people, even though you are under King Jesus, you are scattered throughout the world, and I have taken away the sword from your hands. You are not going to be like a government that can coerce people or punish people for violations of rules. You are going to be a people who does not do that. You grow through persuasion, not coercion, and you exist in all of these different times and places. So we are not under the same covenant structure that Israel was. We're not a nation state. We're a church scattered through many nations. Fourth thing that this means is it does not mean that God does not care about false worship. Keep this in mind. Just because we are in a time when we say we're going to allow people to have different convictions and beliefs about things, it doesn't mean that God doesn't take seriously idolatry. So within the church, we actually take this really, really seriously. We don't tolerate false worship. We don't tolerate someone saying, let's go devote ourselves to this. So the New Testament tells us that if a false teacher, a false prophet, comes into the church and starts to turn people away from God, we have to deal with it decisively. In the same way that in the Old Testament, they had to deal with a false prophet decisively. Now, we don't use civil penalties. We don't use execution, but we do use church discipline. And we do use excommunication. We say, you are kicked out of this place. We take away your ability to influence people in this place because we take seriously that we are devoted to God and we will not let you lead us astray. The excommunication in the New Testament is usually the equivalent to execution in the Old Testament when it comes to serious sins. That's what the church does to deal with those sorts of things. We kick you out. Another thing to keep in mind is that the modern idea of religious freedom is a Christian invention. Most people think that this came along because there were people who realized, well, we don't want to believe in Christianity, so we want the freedom to believe other things. It actually came along because there were Christians who said, when we reflect on our core beliefs as a faith, we see that what you need to do is give people freedom to express their worship and express their religion based on their conscience. Now, we haven't been consistent with this in every time and place, but over the course of Christian history, the more people have taken seriously deep core things like we come to God by faith, which is something that needs to be freely given, not coerced. We've said we need to give people the freedom to either come or go and not always have to do what they need to do because they've been coerced to do it. We've experienced persecution at the hands of the Romans and martyrdom in all sorts of different times and places. And when you're a group of people that has experienced the oppression of others for your beliefs, you start to soften and say, we're not going to do that to other people. We also know that at the heart of the Christian faith, the main message that we have is a message of a man who did not destroy, but died for the people who disagreed with him. So if Jesus, the one who actually could judge everybody, says, I'm going to die for the people who disagree with me, who worship differently, that we can do the same. Now, this isn't to say there won't be a reckoning. At the end of time, when Jesus comes back, he will say, all idolaters have to face up. All those who worship false gods, all those who chase after anything other than me, you're going to have judgment here. But in this time, God is patient. He is wanting all to come to repentance, and so we don't impose that on anybody. Now, going back to the law in Deuteronomy, when they find a false prophet, when they find someone leading people into idolatry, it says you're supposed to execute that person, and the family member of the person is supposed to throw the first stone. Even if it's your brother, even if it's your child, you've got to be the first one to throw a stone. That seems like an incredibly harsh punishment. Now, execution aside, that may be hard for us. What about making the family member throw the first stone? Few different reasons for this. First, it forces the accuser to take responsibility. What it means is you would not casually accuse someone of idolatry. You would not casually accuse someone of a capital crime if you knew that you had to be the one to throw the stone. You're not handing them over to some authority over there that's going to deal with them. You are saying, I have to be the one to personally take responsibility for the punishment, which is a lot harder to do, and you better be absolutely sure you're right about the accusation. It's also kind of a deterrent. If you knew that your own family members would not shield you, that if they found you doing something like false prophecy or idolatry or some other capital crime, that they would turn you in and they would be involved in the punishment. It would say, I can't just hide behind my family. They're going to honor this law and turn me in. It's a deterrent. You're not going to get away with this. Now, that seems really harsh, but the consequences of idolatry on the community would be really significant. If they start dividing their loyalty between God and other gods, it's going to unravel the fabric of what they've got going on. And so you got to take that really seriously. It also forces people to demonstrate which loyalty comes first. Where is your primary allegiance? Is it to God or to your family? Now, hopefully, you don't have to choose between those two things, but when you do have to choose, will you choose God or will you choose your family? Jesus actually talks about this. He says, anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He says, there are times when if you have to choose between God or your family, you have to choose God. The truth is this: when family members give up on convictions, it is very easy for us who love those people to also give up on ours. When our children or our spouse or our siblings change their allegiance, change their views, change their worship, change what they believe about life, we often say, well, you know what? I love them, so I'm not going to push back. And before long, it's I love them, so I'm going to, say that it's okay. Before long, it's I love them, so I'm going to listen to them and be persuaded. We very often put family before God, and God knows that. So He says deliberately, you've got to be willing to say, if there's a choice between God and my family, I choose God. Now, big picture, when we're talking about Deuteronomy 13, this is not a blueprint for modern laws, okay? So I want you to hear that really clearly. No one is saying this ought to be done. You ought to execute people who don't worship Jesus. But what it should do is sober us that God takes very seriously us being loyal as individuals and as church communities to Him and Him alone. God wants our undivided hearts no matter what. Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.